There's no question that our best, strongest pain medicines are the opioids, but these are the same drugs that have a reputation for causing addiction and other terrible things. Now, in fact, the rate of addiction amongst pain patients who are treated by doctors is much less than 1%. They don't wear out, they go on working, they do not have serious medical side effects. And so these drugs, which I repeat are our best, strongest pain medications, should be used much more than they are for patients in pain.
That's right. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Roma Nation. I'm AK, your favorite guy. Tonight, we're going to continue part 2 of 3 on the war on drugs. So sit tight and get your popcorn ready, because Roma Nation starts now.
That beat does slap, Roma. Well done, man.
Who made that intro? This girl. That's right.
I do love it every time you play it. I'm like, hey.
It's like, I did it. I did it. Yes. Oh, man. Elizabitty joins us for another round. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Roma. I got my legal drug of choice, caffeine, and that's about it. That's going to keep me up for the show.
Yeah, same here. New Amsterdam's got me covered.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it. I mean, this is a great series, and thank you so much for bringing this to the forefront and having me included, because it's one of the most important discussions that need to be had.
Oh, absolutely. So last week we talked about prohibition.
Mm-hmm.
And how the government cracked down on recreational use of certain things,
right?
And also how the media portrayed it back then versus now, and then leading all the way up into the war on drugs with Nixon. But in between there was a couple things sprinkled in. You talk about experimental drugs and different experiments that they tried on people, like the Tuskegee experiment, things like that. And what is morally okay.
Right. Right. As if, like, it could be the craziest drug. It could be in the form of medicine given by doctors. It could be heavily addicted, like dude said in the video. But as long as it's morally okay, as long as it's given to us and it's said, it's okay, you could take it. Until they change their mind later on after everybody's addicted to it, then it's fine. Exactly.
Well, I can tell you something you can be addicted to. Me on X.
Yes.
The real Roma _AK. We got Biddy over here at Elizabitty 213A. And now we have a Discord that is open to the public. This is where you can chat with your host and send us news and articles that you want to hear on the show. Also, we have our new website.
I love it.
That's right. So we got Sunset Rants here. We got Roma Nation, all part of the Rise of Middle America Network, where you can see our most recent content, news, rants, deep dives, and as well as the upcoming content that you don't want to miss. So if you want more breaking news, stories, and on-the-ground coverage of events happening here in America, we have a link at the bottom of the page where you can make a monetary contribution to creating for all of our viewers. So please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to push this post-cancel culture society. Biddy.
That's right.
Post-cancel culture.
That's right.
Can't cancel us.
That's right. That's right. And that's why these big media groups, I'm sorry, but that's why they're hurting right now, because they're so intertwined with like the overarching companies that have bought them out and tell them what to do and tell them what not to say and all this other kind of stuff. So they know they're losing influence with people. And independent media is on the rise, man. And if you guys want to support that, make a monetary contribution, like Roma said, go to our website. And it's because of you guys that we're growing every day, and more exciting news to come. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and pick up where we left off, shall we? And this is it's the second installment where we continue our deep dive into the war on drugs, focusing on a period of President Richard Nixon's declaration in the early 1970s through the modern opioid epidemic. So we're going to explore legislative actions, the evolution of drug enforcement policies, and the roles of federal agencies such as the FBI and the CIA in drug interdiction efforts. Right. So we'll also examine the rise of prescription drug abuse, particularly the impact of Oxycontin, and how these developments are different in affected communities across the racial and socioeconomic lines. Did you have anything else before we start here?
No, but you know what's really cool that I just wanted to add in, that I because I was looking it up. Opioids is like one of the oldest drugs.
Yeah.
I like really, really old, like talking about BCE stuff, like insane. I was like, what?
Remember the BC powder that you just like? So that's probably where they got the name from.
Yeah. I mean, it's been around for quite some time. So, but and then it went into the pharmaceutical industry, and in a different way. So, tell us all about it, man.
Here we go. All right. So, without further ado, this is Past, Present, and Future: War on Drugs, Part 2 of 3.
Sorry. That is the sexiest bump I've ever seen.
Well, I can't believe I came up with that. We gotta.
You've been wanting that for a minute.
Yeah, I know.
Back to the Future. Yeah.
We gotta thank Uncapped Turtle for that. He's
awesome.
The mastermind behind all of these, making me look good because I'm ugly. So gotta work on that.
Never that. Yeah, Turtle's the man, bro. Like, wow.
All right. So we're gonna have a couple. We got a lot of sections to cover here because between 1970 and 2000, there were so many different issues, so many different dynamics of.
They all intertwine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. On the war on drugs, going back to what they passed then, through the Summer of Love. Well, the first Summer of Love, and then and then through the crack epidemic, going into the opioid epidemic, and a bunch of things in between. So let's go ahead and get started with, back in the 70s. What action did Congress take to combat the abuse of recreational drugs? Because after Nixon declared the war on drugs, Congress took a significant action to create federal framework to combating the use on drugs. So let's talk about the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970. All right, let's see if I can get this pulled up here. Boom. All right, so this was back in October 27, 1970, is the United States federal law that, with subsequent modification, requires the pharmaceutical industry to maintain physical security and strict record keeping for certain types of drugs. Controlled substances are divided into 5 schedules or classes on the basis of their potential for abuse, accepted medical use, and accepted safety under medical supervision. Substances in Schedule 1 have a high potential for abuse, no accredited medical use, and lack of accepted safety. So if you ever heard like Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, that's what this goes into. So from Schedules 2 to 5, substances decrease in potential for abuse. The schedule is a substance in place and determines how it must be controlled. Prescriptions for drugs in all schedules must bear the physician's Federal Drug Enforcement Administration or the DEA license number, but some drugs in Schedule 5 do not require prescription. State schedules may vary from federal schedules. So I'm guessing Schedule 5 would be like your Tylenol, your Advil, you know, ibuprofen, where they've shown that they're not dangerous if you don't take the entire bottle.
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah, because anything can be abused, and we've seen that, we've heard that over the years and stuff like that. But it's kind of like they're laying the groundwork, like, because you have to put all this stuff in place before you start cracking down on things. Yeah, so they're definitely getting it all set up for some incarcerations. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, it's a big reason why they created the DEA in 1973, because Nixon established the DEA to enforce drug laws and coordinate efforts across state and federal levels. The DEA became a central player in combating both domestic drug abuse and international drug trafficking, which is part of it. I mean, this is a really big agency. It's one of the biggest agencies.
Right.
That they have.
Their jurisdiction, as you said, it has no bounds, basically.
Exactly. And then there was another act that was passed, which is the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. This act imposed mandatory minimum sentencing for drug offenses. I know this is starting to sound familiar. With harsher penalties for crack cocaine compared to powdered cocaine, and it aimed to curb the rise of the crack epidemic, but also led to disproportionate incarceration rates, particularly along people like me.
That's right. Yeah, because it was more expensive for the powder. The crack was a cheaper alternative, and it was more accessible for in the urban areas. Which is kind of wild.
And you would probably know this back in the 80s in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania.
Harlem was the spot. Yeah,
it was a massive problem there.
Yeah, you got the lean. You seen the lean. I'm sorry, but it was a thing. Like, you went on the train, you're standing there, you mind your own business, trying to go to work, and you see somebody literally defying gravity, just bent all the way over and not falling. Like, it used to be a thing, like, with our friend, like, how is this person not falling? Like, it was like the Matrix.
Exactly.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, so the next part here is what restrictions were put on pharmaceutical companies about the experimental drugs. Because remember, we talked about the Tuskegee experiment beforehand, and that went on for nearly 15 years. And completely ravaged the entire African American community, which is part of the reason why now today, African Americans and Black people, they are afraid of any kind of intervention from pharmaceutical companies. They're like,
can you blame them?
No, of course not.
It's like, I've been to this rodeo before, bro. What do you think I'm crazy? Yeah.
Exactly. Especially if they lived through it. And of course, back then there was no cures.
Right.
So once you got it, you were stuck with it. You had it. You had the clap. You had the clap.
Yep.
All right. So in response to growing misuse of prescription drugs and past controversies like I don't know, what is the thalidomide?
Hold on, I'm trying to look for the word.
Thalidomide. There we go.
Thalidomide.
Right. Yeah. I had to get my tongue in the right position. No,
my old eyes was trying to focus. Both of us together. It's like the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, like the thalidomide tragedy in the 1960s. You remember that, when a bunch of people took it, and it was like nearly 1,000 people dead, all in the same area. That's crazy.
Was it prescribed for expectant mothers for nausea, to counteract nausea, and then it happened to give birth defects, and that's
right.
Yeah.
And let me go back. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself in the story. No, that wasn't it. It was definitely the birth, a lot of big birth defects. We'll go ahead here. There's already a lot of ugly pictures here, so I'm gonna try to move on as fast as I can.
A lot of it just overlaps each other. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really does. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, use of thalidomide in 46 countries by women who were pregnant, or subsequently became pregnant, resulted in the biggest anthropogenic medical disaster ever, with more than 10,000 children born and a range of severe deformities such as prochromilia, as well as thousands of miscarriages. thalidomide was introduced in 1953 as a tranquilizer and was later marketed by the German pharmaceutical company Chemie-Grünenthal. Wow, this is gonna be a rough one.
It's like a roller coaster.
Under the same trade name, Concergan, as a medication for anxiety, trouble sleeping, tension, and morning sickness. This was introduced as a sedative in the medication for morning sickness without having to be tested on pregnant women. While initially deemed to be safe in pregnancy, concerns regarding birth defects were noted in 1961, and the medication was removed from the market in Europe that year.
I mean, listen, I'm happy. Well, no, I can't. Let me go back and not say I'm happy, but like I wouldn't have wanted them to test anything on pregnant women anyhow. But the fact that you push this forward without knowing exactly what might have happened and just started mass prescribing it is insane. Is insane. And why do you think people are so weary about taking medications and other things that they try to push on people today?
Right.
You don't have a good track record.
Yeah, just like last week, and it's like now when you see a commercial, it's like, thank you for choosing,
brought to you by
and it's like side effects include blah 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 blah. Like it's just
right in a very soft and calming voice too, to like seduce you into it. Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, any side effect that's ever happened with the drug, they have to notate it. And that's why they do it, and the most common ones all the way to the least ones. Yeah. So we got the drug amendments of 1962 with the Coffer-Harris amendments, and they required that drug manufacturers provide proof of the safety and efficacy of those products before receiving FDA approval. Clinical trials had met rigorous standards for testing and reporting, and the FDA gained more control over the drug market practices. So you can only imagine what happened much later down the line. Right?
Yep.
Then you have the regulation of controlled substances, and that's under the CSA. Pharmaceutical companies were required to track and report the production, distribution, prescription of controlled drugs, especially those Schedule II categories, which include substances like opioids and amphetamines. This tracking aimed to curb misuse and ensure accountability in the pharmaceutical industry, which is non-existent right now.
Yeah, I know we're going to get to that, but it's kind of crazy how they have like a huge, like a huge catastrophe that happens, right? And then they reel it back in. They put all these great regulations on. Great, everybody's doing well. And then as time goes on, people forget. They start, calming it down. And then they tell you it's for your own good, that they're giving you more options by not regulating so much.
Exactly. But speaking of regulation, let's move on to the connected drug confiscation of the crack epidemic, in the 70s and 80s, and the involvement of the FBI and the CIA. Because first you have the FDA and the CSA, but these other two agencies had a different motive, a completely different motive. Because the aggressive enforcement of policies in the 70s and 80s had unintended consequences that contributed to the crack epidemic. The FBI and DEA operations, they ramped up efforts to seize large quantities of illegal drugs entering the country. Despite their efforts, crack cocaine, which was a cheaper, more potent form of cocaine, became widespread in urban areas during the 1980s. So with the CIA as well, and their controversy, they became embodied in a controversy in its own connection to drug trafficking during the Iran-Contra affair. Allegation arose that the CIA had turned a blind eye or even facilitated the smuggling of cocaine into the U.S. by Nicaraguan Contras as part of a covert operation to fund anti-communism efforts in Central America. I know you guys have seen Narcos on Netflix, and a lot of this is in there.
It's like you try to combat one thing while letting the other thing in, saying that it's to help, with this other thing, but now you're ruined.
Yeah, you robbed Peter to drug Paul.
Right.
That's basically what it was.
Right. Very well said.
Exactly. Yeah. Journalist Gary Webb's series Dark Alliance in the San Jose Mercury News, some people know about that, exposed the connections and leading to intense public scrutiny and investigations. So that actually just came. I don't know how long ago it came out, but there was a huge. Look at this. Look at all of this about the Contra.
Wow, freedom of information and all that.
Yeah, yeah, basically. So let's start off and talk about Contra. All right. So in that article in 1996, the San Jose Mercury News published the first installment of a 3-part series of articles concerning crack cocaine in the CIA and the Nicaraguan Contra army. The introduction first, the installment of the series read, for better part of a decade, a San Francisco Bay Area drug ring sold tons of cocaine to Crips and Blood street gangs on Los Angeles and funneled millions of drug profits to a Latin American guerrilla army run by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, Mercury News investigated, have found. This was, I mean, when this came out, it was like, what in the world?
Again, this is why people stop trusting big bad government, because either it's kind of like that thing in the casino, right? Either you're too stupid to realize you were being scammed or you were in on it. Either way, you're out. It's like the same thing. You're either too stupid to realize that this has a cause and effect in a negative way on the American people, or you were too stupid, you were in on it somehow and you kind of organized it. Either way, you should go down for it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's continue. The 3-day series of articles entitled Dark Alliance, the story behind the crack explosion, told the story of Los Angeles drug operation run by Ricky Donnell Ross, described sympathetically as a disillusioned 19-year-old who at the dawn of the 1980s found himself adrift the streets of South Central Los Angeles. The Dark Alliance series recounted how Ross began peddling small quantities of cocaine in the early 80s and rapidly grew into one of the largest cocaine dealers in Southern California until he was convicted of federal drug trafficking charges in March of 1996. The series claimed that Ross' rise in the drug world was made possible by Oscar Danilo Blandon and Norwin Meneses, yeah. Yeah. Two individuals with ties to the Fuerza Democrática Nicaraguanese, Jesus Christ, I can't speak tonight. One group comprising the Nicaraguan Contras, Blendon and Meneses reportedly sold tons of cocaine to Ross, who in turn converted it to crack and sold it in the black communities of South Central Los Angeles. Blendon and Meneses were said to have used their drug trafficking profits to help fund the Contras army war effort. You know what this kind of reminds me of?
What?
This reminds me of that movie Operation Odessa.
Oh, I never seen that.
Oh my goodness!
I gotta watch that.
That was probably one of the greatest drug trafficking cartel movie I had ever seen. It had everything in it.
Oh, I gotta check that out. Yeah, but it's like, okay, on the one hand, you call something a conspiracy, right? That things were okay, intentional. Maybe they're trying to say the conspiracy is that it was intentionally injected into these communities, but it's not like they did anything to combat it. Really, what they did kind of opened the floodgates, and it was sent to these urban areas, and it just trickled down and became like a huge problem. And then you want to turn around and start saying, "Oh, we're going to crack down on it," and now that you're all addicted, if you don't stop by tomorrow, you're getting thrown in jail for the most amount of time. Right.
Which doesn't make any sense with the 1994 crime bill. Excuse me. Because we all know now that was the case. But there were some undercover, information getters back in the day that knew that this was coming. If it wasn't from the feds, they had a hand in it, because of the way that they were acting, the way that they were prosecuting people and pushing people on, and putting people in positions where they are. What would you call that when they framing?
Yeah.
Where they framed people.
I can't think of the word, but yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And of course,
entrapment.
Entrapment. And it all comes down to.
That's right.
Right
there. Never let a disaster go to waste.
Tell me about it. All right. So we're going to go over a Vice story that talks about this. All right. And this is going to be a majority of our segment tonight. So strap in, folks, because it's going to be a fun one. Let's go.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
For decades, the American government has been accused of intentionally flooding the streets with hard drugs. The CIA and law enforcement have supposedly been funneling drugs into the inner cities and to the African American community in particular as part of a covert effort to stop them attaining stability, building wealth, and achieving political power.
It is aimed at African American. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And for the other non-African people, they should know that this directly will harm them too.
These ideas took particular hold in the 1980s with the emergence of the so-called crack epidemic. It's easy to understand how people of color may not believe the US authorities have their best interests at heart. But do these particular drug charges stick? Did the intelligence agencies actually play a role in flooding American cities with cocaine?
What do you think?
Whoa, that guy just straight, and I love it. It says former LAPD. Like he waited until he wasn't connected anymore. He's like, you know what? I don't give a. I'm going to come out and say it right here, right now, in front of everybody.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because if somebody's going to come out and do that, knowing that they're going to fact check him. Now, back in the day, I mean, this is also Vice. Back before they.
This was when they were
self-destructed. Mm-hmm. But back in the day, like, these are stories that you hear. You hear about, framing people and putting them in positions, between a rock and a hard place. And
that's right.
And having the facilitation, but you weren't able to find that connection into where that money was going and why. And I think these guys explain it really well. So let's go ahead and continue.
Yeah.
In this episode, we're exploring whether the CIA was actually responsible for the crack epidemic and how exactly this story gained so much traction. The story of the CIA and crack cocaine doesn't actually begin on the streets of LA or Miami. It begins in the jungles of Central America. In 1979, the dictatorial government of Nicaragua was overthrown by socialist revolutionaries called the Sandinistas. In response, right-wing groups known as the Contras began a brutal paramilitary campaign, receiving money and weapons from the CIA as part of the Cold War struggle against the Soviet Union.
If we cut off the freedom fighters, we will be giving the Soviets a free hand in Central America, handing them one of their greatest foreign policy victories since World War II.
But in 1982, Democrats in Congress passed laws to cut off support for the Nicaraguan rebels. So the Contras and their CIA backers had to find new ways of funding their struggle. What they found was cocaine. By the late 1970s, more people in the US were snorting coke than ever before. Most of it imported from Colombia. In the early...
Where can I find this stuff?
Oh, boy. Wow. Are you guys out there watching this right now? Like, holy cow.
Like seriously, I feel like Scarface right now.
I was just going to say, right away I heard the song White Lines that plays in that movie. And it was just like rampant. People were just doing, I don't think anybody said anything about it, because it was the powder stuff. It wasn't the stuff they sent to the urban communities. Let's just be real.
Yeah, because we didn't see any of that stuff. It was always the crack pipes. It was always like the manufacture, what do you call it? Aluminum foil and how they manufactured those types of. Yeah, it was ugly. It was very ugly. Because I grew up in New Jersey in the 80s, and it was running rampant. Every party you went to, I mean, you go to the club, and then after you get out and somebody's like, hey, after party at my house, there's always a bathroom that nobody ever goes into. Yeah.
Yep.
You know, that.
Yep. I know. I grew up in New York City. I seen it myself as well. It was just everywhere.
Exactly.
In the 80s, smokable cocaine, or crack, exploded across American cities. This proved to be a gold mine for countless organized crime groups, even those backed by the CIA.
And today, cocaine and marijuana are found throughout our society from top to bottom. And that means corruption, top to bottom, and gang war violence.
The Contras were soon linked with Colombian cartels, and in 1985, reporters Robert Parry and Brian Barger broke an almost unbelievable story. They claimed Nicaraguan rebels were involved in cocaine trafficking, and that not only did the CIA know about these activities, they allowed them to continue in order to help fund the Contras' war effort.
When Bob Perry and Brian Barger got a hold of a CIA report revealing that they were working in the mid-1980s with Contras fighting the Sandinista government, they were warned by their editors that this was not something that was going to make the people that own their newspapers very happy, and most of them ended up losing their jobs.
You see where I'm going with this?
Bro. Please go.
Well, real quick. No, so when you talk about this, the enforcement agencies here in America, that happened first. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff started coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're starting to see kind of like a tale of two worlds, where when you look at things today, like, oh, well, you're poor, or, you know, you're disenfranchised, so vote for me and I'll help, but didn't see the 20 years ago, the entire process that they set up.
That's right.
In order for you to get there. This is sort of like where this all started.
That's right. And these are the kind of things that spark the conversations that we actually all should be having. Looking back and seeing like what really was happening to our country, and how it targeted some groups, and how the fathers were taken from the households, and how it led to other things. And, you know, it all fits. It all goes in line. You know, you can say, okay, you're an adult, don't touch that. But, you know, and we could talk about that. Yes. But
no.
Yeah,
that's why I brought up the whole thing about going to the club, you know, because you go to the club, you have a couple drinks, you get to your friend's house, and they bring over this one random person from the club that they never met. And they're like, hey, let's go ahead and try this. That's where all those like Dare commercials came out.
Yep. and Detective McGruff. Yeah.
Oh man.
They create the problem and then they come to save you. The government's here to save you. We got a plan.
We are the government. We're here to help.
That's right.
Oh,
it's funny how Reagan was the one that said that.
Exactly. All right, let's continue.
At this point, the CIA strongly denied that they were involved in the drug trade. But on the streets, the rumors began to spread that the government was either actively or passively allowing crack to be sold. These remained just rumors until 1996, when a reporter with the San Jose Mercury News named Gary Webb picked up the story from a new angle. Webb investigated the case of Freeway Rick Ross, who in the early 1980s was the most important kingpin in LA's crack scene, and probably America's first ever crack millionaire.
What's the most money you ever made in a day?
Rick Ross.
Right.
Rick Ross, really? That's what you changed the
Out
name
of all
to?
the people, yeah.
Really, bro? Is that where that came from? I'm on to you, Rick Ross.
Right. Oh man. You were right. This
$3
is a
million.
great video, bro.
Yes.
What Webb uncovered
Oh, wait,
was that
hold on.
Ross's
Sorry.
main cocaine supplier,
I gotta take
named
that.
Gary Webb, picked up the story from a new angle. Webb investigated the case of Freeway Rick Ross, who in the early 1980s was the most important kingpin in LA's crack scene, and probably America's first ever crack millionaire.
What's the most money you ever made in a day?
$3 million.
What Webb uncovered was that Ross's main cocaine supplier was a guy named Danilo Blandon, a Nicaraguan exile who funneled tens of thousands of dollars in cocaine profits back to the Contras through banks in Miami. Blandon, in turn, worked for Norwin Menezes, perhaps the biggest drug trafficker in Nicaragua, who had deep ties to the Contra leadership and was widely thought to benefit from CIA protection.
The DEA had always tried to arrest Nora Meneses, who was living openly and raising money for the Contras, but had never been able to build a case against him, and felt like there was something about this guy that must explain why they couldn't do that he was protected, in other words. And when Gary Webb's story came along, he not only showed where the connection was between Meneses and Blandon and Freeway Ricky Ross, but he also went into all this history and unveiled how there was a very large, well-documented crack distribution ring that had operated for years, with the CIA turning a blind eye.
What's the process?
I'm literally speechless. Like I'm so glad that I didn't watch this prior, that I'm watching it here with you and everybody else. Like this is so wild. And then you think, like, how can this guy in America, just some random dude, get a connection to somebody in Nicaragua like that at that status, who now we know with all of this stuff, you know, with the CIA and you know, allowing their drug trade to go on to come here. Wow.
Well, you have to think about things like Operation Condor and the cooperation with Latin American governments, and their involvement down there, and that's where you get people like Pablo Escobar, and why people like him rise to prominence, because the people in South America knew what America was doing. You know, and there's a reason why he came to prominence. Is because as long as you didn't mess with him, he took care of you. You know, because those countries were very, very poor.
Right.
And there were a lot of communities that were very, very poor. And, you know, he built like soccer fields and all this other stuff. I'm not trying to talk up the guy.
No. But to the public, he looked like, you know, like a savior, even though, like, you know, what he was doing, you know, was bad. Because he even, if I remember correctly, he even tried to run for president or governor, or, you know, he tried to run for public office at one point, and he was getting a lot of backing at one point, Pablo Escobar. But yeah, so like you said, okay, so it started in the beginning. So they basically made a deal, right? Because they had this war with the Soviet Union. They wanted to be able to use South America, Nicaragua, to, you know, to with the guns and everything like that. So he said, okay, you help us with this, we have to give you something in return. What we're going to give you is access to the American people.
Exactly. And the only way to pay for that is you had to work with the cartels to get the money into the United States, get people addicted to the drugs, have them go to jail, have to pay all these fines, all this other stuff, and that money back out. You know, and especially with all the big kingpins and drug lords, that's what we talk about.
Rick Ross.
Not just Rick Ross, but Scarface.
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah.
And why Scarface is such a, you know, a cultish movie.
That's right.
Because it kind of resembled the times back then. Because everybody knew, they didn't really talk about it, but they knew about it, and they were just kind of looking like, I got a point there.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Let's see what else they got.
That you go through, like, okay, you're the guy on top, and where do you get your coke from?
I was getting my coke from a guy by the name of Oscar Danilo Blandon, who also was my informant. He's the guy that set me up with the police. When I went to trial, we found out that he was what they call a Contra. The Contras was backed by the CIA, and it sparked this big investigation by this reporter called Gary Webb.
In August of 1996, the Mercury News published Webb's reports in a 3-part series titled Dark Alliance. The story grabbed attention across the US, particularly amongst the African-American community, which had been targeted by law enforcement following the rise of crack.
Tell America what the story is about. It was about a cocaine ring that operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s.
Montel.
Right. We all know him, and I'm very upset with him right now for bringing a certain someone on the scene, but I digress.
Yeah. You see how there's a huge connection of this huge circle that's starting to get smaller and smaller. Now you're understanding how much of a connection everybody had.
That's right. Because not everybody's going to get that interview.
Oh,
no. You know what I mean? You have to have some kind of connections there to get these kind of interviews with these prominent people.
Yeah, and Montel back in the 90s, he was Montel, like everybody. He was up there with Jerry Springer.
Mm-hmm.
He was up there with Maury. He was up there with like Sally Jesse Raphael,
Ricky Lake, Jenny
Ricky
Jones.
Lake.
Yeah.
Remember all them? Oh my god.
Jenny Jones was my jam. Don't come for me. I still love that one.
Ricky Lake with her 18 kids. She was always pregnant on that show.
Yeah.
She totally was.
But yeah, this is so wild. And like, you know, as he was saying, like basically, you know, when he went to court, you know, this guy was there and you know, it kind of solidified like the connections between everybody and how he was able to get through it all.
Yeah,
unscathed.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you would have to because he knew way too much.
Mm-hmm.
He knew way too much. He knew names. He knew like where things were going to get dropped. Like he knew a bunch of things that they didn't want him to know. And you can't bring him to court and expect him not to, you know,
want to testify
not just that, but file discovery.
Yep.
Because discovery would have destroyed everything. It's the same thing with January 6th. It's the reason why the DOJ never charged Trump with January 6th is because of discovery. Because they would have to show every single person that was in that crowd, every single one of the cases. They'd have to show all of the officers waving people in. It would have been a really bad look.
That's right.
So, but anyways, let's continue.
Particularly amongst the African American community, which had been targeted by law enforcement following the rise of crack.
Tell America what the story is about. It was about a cocaine ring that operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, called the FDN. This was an army that the CIA started in 1981 and supported.
Better known to us, most of us who remember news, the Contras.
Nowhere in Dark Alliance did Webb explicitly assert that the CIA was responsible for the crack epidemic, let alone that they intentionally sold the drug. But that was the narrative that got picked up in the popular imagination, probably not helped by the Mercury News illustrating the feature with an image of a guy smoking a crack pipe superimposed on the CIA logo. But the story took off not just due to his explosive claims, but also because of another new and highly addictive force that had begun to reshape American society: the internet. Dark Alliance was the first.
The internet.
This which it changed. I mean, you could say whatever you want about how the internet is, you know, poisoning minds and all this other kind of stuff, but when used correctly, you really are become privy to a lot of information. And if you take the time to connect the dots, you'll be floored, like I am right now.
Yeah, yeah. And the internet also didn't have much regulation back then.
Right, the Wild
I
West.
can't even tell you. You want to talk about the dark ages of the internet?
Right.
Between, like 1996 and 2002, before AOL became prominent. Like, woo!
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times somebody tried to lure me out of my house in the AOL chat room, the Water Cooler 3.
ASL. Oh yeah, it was on there.
I didn't forget about that.
Oh, it was on there. Oh man. But yeah, this is wild. This is wild, and it's crazy because, like he said in the what's the name of it? The Dark Alliance. They never actually said like, okay, it's the CIA that did this, but the front of it, like the poster, it was on the CIA emblem, and it basically is just like, you tell me what you think, kind of like, which kept them safe, I'd imagine, and which allowed it to get pushed out, which is kind of brilliant.
No, it absolutely is.
It's a major piece of investigative journalism to be published simultaneously in print and online. The story went viral, getting picked up by everyone from street protesters to talk radio hosts and eventually politicians looking to attack the Reagan and Bush administrations. California Congresswoman Maxine Waters became a particular champion of the piece.
As a public elected officials, all of us must be concerned.
Bro, she was old back then. Holy crap. Are you kidding me?
She's a vampire. Oh man, I didn't expect to see her in this video.
Like, look at her. My goodness. How long has she been in Congress?
Too long, I'd imagine. But I guess you could say on a plus for her, she aged well because she looks exactly the same.
She looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. She's the same. She got not one gray hair in her head.
That's right. That's true. That's true. Big
Yeah,
ups to Maxine
that must be that must be that Wall Street money keeping her going.
That's right.
We'll leave it at that. Let's
That's
continue.
right.
That our government could have anyway been involved in drug trafficking.
The reaction to the story was so intense that the CIA director took the unprecedented step of defending the agency at a heated LA community meeting.
It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. I will get to the bottom of it, and I will let you know the results of what I found.
How are we supposed?
You seen dudes right there, right? They were looking at him like, yeah, all right, you better get to the bottom of it.
Where have I heard this before? Oh, the Butler shooting. We're looking to get to the bottom of it, and blah 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 blah. Like it's just one thing after another, like this.
But that's the thing, right? It's always one thing after another. And we have our everyday lives. We have to go to work. We have to pay our bills. We have to take care of our families and all this other kind of stuff. So it's very easy for them to say that. And then something else crazy happens and another thing crazy happens. And people forget to look back and see if there was any developments on these things.
Okay, Brian.
It might be a wig. It might be a wig. It might be color. It's true.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Don't call it a weave if you want to survive past tonight.
So I have a question. Was she saying that something needs to be investigated about the link between the CIA, or was she pushing back and saying that, yelling at people that it was wrong?
Became a particular champion of the peace.
As a public elected officials, all of us must be concerned that our government could have anyway been involved in drug trafficking.
The reaction to the story was so intense that the CIA director took the unprecedented step of defending the agency.
I mean, at this point, we wouldn't even be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if she was trying to bring it to, I have my gripes with her about a ton of stuff. Yes, we all do. There's a lot that she's done in the past few years that is terrible. But if she was pushing for that to come out, whatever agenda she had going on, we don't know. But good for her. Good for her that she was actually trying to bring it to prominence, bring it to, highlight it, because as we see, this is crazy.
This is like the things that I find.
I'm telling you this, and I love that this is old school Vice right here. You know what I mean? Like this is the good old days.
Exactly. Let's go.
See, at a heated LA community meeting.
It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. I will get to the bottom of it, and I will let you know the results of what I found.
How are we supposed to trust the CIA official to investigate themselves?
What was equally shocking, though, was the reaction of America's mainstream media. Webb and the San Jose Mercury News often maintain that Dark Alliance was intended as the beginning of an investigation that larger newspapers with more resources could then continue. But what actually happened was that instead of investigating the CIA, major papers like the LA Times, Washington Post, and New York Times all attacked Webb himself. Webb was eventually hounded from his job and found himself unable to work as a journalist. He died by suicide in 2004.
All three major newspapers felt completely caught off guard by.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. Like, I wonder how he felt after that, knowing that he just uncovered probably one of the biggest scandals in the government history, and to just be shamed out of your job or fired, and just nobody wants to hire you for what? You didn't have the internet back then. You didn't have.
I was going to say that's right. You didn't have places like us, with independent media. You didn't.
Yeah, I would have told him, "Hey, come over here, bro. I need an investigative journalist."
Absolutely.
People on the grounds. Which, by the way, my own boy T-Bone here, who's my my new on the grounds guy, got us some very interesting video that I'm going to be showing over the next couple of weeks. So I figured I'd give you a shout out, T-Bone.
Yes. Yeah,
he
did some great work, man.
He
Oh,
really did. Like he knocked it out of the park, and I wanted to
That's
make sure
right.
that everybody knew that. But yeah, so let's go ahead and finish out this video, and then we'll get through the segment.
By this story, so they fully attacked Harry Webb with a vengeance, unlike anything that had ever been seen before, and completely attempted to not only discredit his story and frame it as a conspiracy theory, but pretty much ruin his entire reputation.
We saw a complete failure, perhaps one of the most shameful examples of how the mainstream press can operate in destroying a fellow journalist or getting at an important.
freedom of the press. Freedom of the press. Where is it?
Look at it now.
Yep.
But look at how it's going now with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what other people are out there that got their lives destroyed by the press? If you look at who is the kid that the Native American, he said it looked like he was trying to make fun of the Native Americans, and it was actually the other way around. And now is Covington Catholic school kids, and how they made them look. Tucker Carlson, what's happened to him? Like, how does the mainstream media have this much power?
Well, and that just kind of like goes to show you, because over the years, that's probably why the people that have all the power and all these big influencers, like, you know, we've always alleged BlackRock, Vanguard, all these have started to control the media because they didn't want stuff like this happening ever again while they're doing all this background stuff. They didn't want actual journalism. And that's why today we're like, where are the real journalists? Please stand up. Because they're nowhere anymore. They're all controlled. Anybody you see on that big screen, a lot of them are controlled. We saw what happened to Tucker Carlson when he came out and he decided, like, even on media where we thought, hey, they're doing something, you know, they're kind of like on our side. They're on Fox.
On Fox.
Right.
And Fox got drilled after that because, you know, it's funny when I talk about Fox and I have an article, I call them Dominion News, formerly known as Fox News.
That's right.
And if you know, you know. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that's where, I mean, Fox dropped out of prominence during 2020 election, but that was the moment where you had the diehard Fox fans go, oh, wow.
Yep.
Of all people, this guy?
Mm-hmm.
See you later. We're going out. And I think that kind of started like this snowball effect.
Yep.
Of different media personalities, even people on CNN that left. You know,
yep.
What about the Chris Cuomo?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with him.
Yep.
He left, and right now he's trying to
reinvent himself.
Yeah, exactly, because he has to.
Yep.
You know, Jen Psaki, almost to an extent. I mean, she's still kind of, you know, in that sense, but at least she'll call things out.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. She's a very slick character, I gotta say. Mm-hmm. She makes sure that she doesn't go too far, and she covers herself. Exactly. She has aspirations, you can tell.
Either that or she got paid a lot of money.
Yeah, that too.
Mm-hmm.
That too.
And Webb suffered mightily for this.
But as people got more and more lost in the minutiae of attacking or defending Webb's journalism, the focus on the CIA's involvement in the drug trade began to get lost. A fact that internal CIA documents held up as a good example of managing a public relations nightmare. But in 1998, the CIA's own Inspector General released a report essentially admitting that many elements of the Dark Alliance story were true, that the agency had known that people linked with the Contras were importing cocaine, had done nothing to stop.
Oh, buddy. It's really crazy. It's really crazy because you hear all these years, right? Decade in between, all this stuff happening, and you're like, I mean, I don't know if it's just because I wasn't that into politics. I wasn't really looking around. I mean, at that time I was still in high school. So, you know, I didn't really, you know, put a lot of emphasis on looking up this stuff. But I don't remember I mean, we know not much has come from all of this. Every time, something's come out, then they investigated themselves, like the lady said. How can the CIA investigate themselves? And then like a decade or more so later, then this guy comes out. It's still, what, 20 years ago? And nothing has happened. Oh, you're muted, I think, Roma. I can't hear you.
I said this 30 years ago.
30 years ago, right?
Yeah. Are we that old?
Yeah. Maybe I'm like, I have like a mental block and I wanted to make myself 10 years younger. Why not? I'm definitely getting up there, that's for sure. But yeah, I just
Ozempic. No, I'm just kidding.
Might get some extra people in here. They'll push the algorithm for us who say it over and over again.
Oh my goodness. All right, so let's finish it up.
Investigation.
So you had the CIA finally coming to the table and admitting that what we reported in the 80s and what Webb reported in the 90s was in fact true.
Mr. Meneses was actually indicted in 1984. He was known within my own sources in DEA told me he was known as El Rey de la Droga, the king of drugs. He was in more than 40 files and indicted mysteriously, and people within DEA say that it was CIA intervention that kept this sealed indictment from ever being opened.
In one case detailed in the report, when traffickers linked to the Nicaraguan king of drugs, Norwin Meneses, were busted in San Francisco in 1983, the CIA even requested that tens of thousands of dollars, which had been seized, be returned to the drug traffickers.
The CIA admitted that they knew that these guys were selling drugs and had went to the Attorney General and asked the Attorney General, could they not report it? Because the mission that they were trying to accomplish was so big, it was a matter of U.S., what do they call it?
National security?
National security.
So wait, the CIA was allowing this just kind of to happen, the drugs to go in, and they weren't putting it there, but they were allowing it to happen and funneling the money.
That's what we believe.
This is a complex story, but let's try to answer the big questions. Did the CIA actually sell crack? On the evidence we've got, no. There were no agents with sunglasses and earpieces slinging rocks on the streets of Compton. Did the CIA work with and protect major drug traffickers? Yes, absolutely. They've been forced to admit that publicly. The real tragedy here is that as far as we know, no one from the CIA or the mainstream media even lost their jobs over this. The only people who suffered for it were the journalists who exposed the story and the millions of people targeted by the unjust and racist laws that were passed in response to the 1980s crack crisis.
We'd like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs.
Bro. Whoa.
So I've come to the conclusion that our government has always been this incompetent. It's just that the internet has exposed them at the point in which the information's getting out faster than they can cover it up.
That's right.
And because of that is the reason why they're trying to attack free speech now. It's why they're trying to attack the internet. It's why they, I heard this on one of the news stations in the morning a couple days ago where they were like, yeah, free speech is free speech, but the whole I got something for you. But we didn't have the internet before then. And it's like, okay, well, if you have the internet and things are coming out much faster than what you would like to hide, wouldn't that make it much easier for you to find the people that you need to shut down? But then again, word spreads much faster nowadays. When you look at the whole thing, when I did which episode was it? It was the Black Lives Matter versus the Civil Rights Movement.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you see how fast the riots for George Floyd happened. Mm-hmm. But yet when it came to Latasha Harlins and Rodney King, this was over the course of like a couple of months that these things happened.
Yep.
It shows you how fast the internet is moving. And especially with Elon Musk taking over Twitter now X, things are getting out almost instantaneously, and they can't stop it from happening.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on X right now, there's some things about Harris and Walz that are coming out that they can't stop. And it's
Mm-hmm.
happening at like this perfect timing right before the election.
Yep, and mainstream media is scrambling. Like when I try to look for articles to see, to see if it's backed up or whatever, they're scrambling to put out, this is claims on social media, but they really can't combat it. But at what point do you say, okay, if it's not an article from a prominent news source, does that make it not true?
Yeah, exactly. Which brings us into our last segment. Let's talk about oxycodone.
Woo!
So
This guy looks
oxycodone.
so trusting. Sorry.
Oh, I know, right? I mean, look at these these ads that they had with
Take the
oxycodone.
next step in. Let's move forward.
Let's move forward with oxycodone. All right. So oxycodone, it's used to help relieve stress and ongoing pain, such as due to cancer. Oxycodone belongs in a class of drugs known as opioid wow, that word just popped right out.
Analgesics. Yeah. It makes you want to say it the wrong way too. Which
This is why the internet has ruined us. Okay.
Oh, please, spell correct has destroyed me. I
Oh,
can't
my
spell
goodness.
to save my life anymore.
Oh, sorry, analgesics.
It's like Arnold. Yeah.
Yeah, it works in a brain to change how your body feels and responds to pain. The higher strengths of the drug, more than 40 milligrams per tablet, should be used only if you've been regularly taking moderate to large amounts of opioid pain medication. These strengths may cause overdose, even death, if taken by a person who has not been regularly taking opioids. Do not use extended release form of oxycodone to relieve pain that is mild or that will go away in a few days. Medication is not for occasional as needed use.
Yeah, tell that to somebody who's gaining an addiction to it, because they build up a tolerance to it, and they build it up a lot quicker than the industry will allow them to get more medicine, a higher
Exactly.
dose. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember this back in after I graduated high school. This was like a massive, people in my high school would be asking around, like, do you guys have any oxy?
Yep.
Does anybody here have oxy?
Yep.
And I'm like, what the fuck? What is oxy? I'm only 17 years old. I don't take drugs. Like, what the what?
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where you heard the name and you were like, oh, this person takes oxy, but you never knew what it did.
Right. You never knew how serious it was. Yeah. There was a lot of terms and stuff that went around, popping or something like that. Like people used to say, are you popping pills? Like kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. So it was able to pass through the FDA regulations and were financial, federal, and social. Let's talk about the financial and federal repercussions. All right. So the approval process for oxycodone was based on studies sponsored by Purdue that minimized the drug's addiction to risk, or at least addiction to risk. The FDA approved labeling the oxycodone include language emphasizing its low abuse potential, which was heavily influenced by Purdue's marketing tactics. Do you remember when they showed the video of the guy coming out that was saying, "Hey, we got a new drug coming out," and he went on stage and he was screaming like, "Yeah, let's go! It's time!" It was crazy.
Yeah.
Back in the day, we had those pyramid schemes and stuff. That's how it was.
Yeah. It's just crazy. And then, you find out the influence and stuff like that, they've heavily influenced this because they wanted to sell these drugs. It made them a ton of money. Again, the money. It's always the money. That's it.
But so the financial impact, as we're going into, generated billions of dollars in Purdue Pharma, but the company was later embroiled in lawsuits for its role in the opioid epidemic. In 2007 and again in 2020, Purdue faced criminal charges including misleading the public about addiction risks. Because between that time, 60,000 people lost their lives on it.
Oh my gosh.
60,000. And they made like $15 billion off of it. So not only were they taken to court, but they only how much was, I think it was like $7 billion they had to pay back to the families of the 60,000.
Yeah.
Which was like $40,000 a family.
Right. And it's like a drop in the bucket if you're making that type of money.
Well, it's not just that, but they made that money over years and took that money and invested it in other things.
Right.
You
That
know?
made more money. Yeah.
To make more money. So they made more than $15 billion off of this, at least as far as the family is concerned.
Yeah. Fast forward to now, everything is brought to you by this drug company.
Yeah. But if my mind serves me correct, not only they only get $40,000 a head, but they told them that they were not allowed to sue them ever again.
That was the condition.
That was the condition to get the $40,000.
$40,000 for a loss of a family member. That's like a slap in the face.
No, it really is. When you talk about a lot of the conditions that are going on now, which we'll talk about next week.
Yes.
You see the similarities, but now it's like accepted. It's completely accepted. Because if you look at doctors' offices across the country, or at least from my knowledge, or at least from what I've been hearing, they say, okay, what you hurting here? You're doing this? Is there an issue? Okay, well, I'm going to prescribe you this. Why? Because they have the funnel operation of cash coming around, kind of like when you look at Ukraine.
Yep.
Yeah, you didn't think I was going to bring that up.
No, but it is. That's what it is. It's the obsession with money. It's the obsession, that just totally clouds your judgment. Like, everybody's got a soul, right? Everybody's got that inner voice that tells them this is wrong. Like, no matter what you try to say, like you didn't know, that it's wrong. But because they're making so much money, they're getting so many connections, they're living lavish lifestyles, and I'm sure a lot of their families don't abuse these kinds of things because they keep them away from it. Everybody else does. They're just gonna keep going, and I don't know. I really don't know how they sleep at night, but I guess they just don't think about it.
Yeah, it's not just money; it's quick money.
Yeah,
it's you go out, you sell the product, and next thing you know, you have $2 billion in your pocket. You're like, and then the next year, you got another $2 billion in your pocket.
Yeah,
and you haven't even figured out how to spend the first $2 billion. You haven't figured out how you're still putting your money in different places and different assets, because you can't just hold $2 billion.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to, not a lot, thankfully, but I do talk to a lot of people. I work in the medical industry where they're hooked on these opioids, and even though they have the iStop program, that regulates, administering the medication and prescribing it, and you have to wait 30 days before you can get it again. And they have all these kind of regulations, and you have to keep taking blood work to make sure that, you're not going over a certain amount of tolerance and taking it otherwise. They still abuse it because it's highly addictive, and you gain that tolerance and you want more. And if they keep it, and then they get regulated so heavy, they go into the streets to get their fix.
Exactly, because the misuse fueled like a nationwide crisis, right? It led to thousands of deaths again, and having opioid addiction rates. I couldn't even tell you how many families I talked to in the 2010s about. It's like, yeah, my uncle or like my ex-husband, he was just addicted and all this other stuff. And it's almost not even their fault. Like, yeah, it's their fault to an extent because, they're putting it into their bodies, but because of how it makes them feel, you almost feel like they were kind of coerced into this by the strength value of the drug.
Yeah, I mean, you throw your back out, you're in immense pain daily, you can't even move, and then you take this drug and you're just numb. all of that goes away. You start building tolerance to it, take more, because you want that. Again, it's not that you want the buzz, like you just want to be high. It's more of like you want the pain to go away. And you're getting it from a doctor, somebody that you trust that's prescribing it to you. So you're like, that it can't be anything wrong with it, so I'm going to take it. But, you know, even though they say we're going to regulate this stuff, you can't go into people's homes and say and snap the bottle out of their hand. You know, it's just going to happen.
Exactly. So now that we talk about the opioid epidemic, and then we talk about the crack epidemic in the 80s, I mean, this was like, what, 14-year difference?
Yeah.
What was the difference? Because you had the African American communities that were hit hard by this.
Yeah.
But as far as the opioid epidemic, I don't see any African Americans in the 80s getting restitution from the government or from different companies or from the drug cartels or from, you know, the misuse on within the inner cities,
right,
on something that should have never been there in the first place.
See, and that's something I can get behind. These
exactly.
are real conversations that
if you want to talk about
have.
race relations and
Right.
things like this here
That's right.
is a travesty.
Right.
when it
But
comes
you
to-
know what? They know this. And that's why they go back to slavery. So it's like the most ridiculous thing. And the argument can be, well, I never owned slave. You were never a slave. And it could
Mhm.
be that argument. They never have the real discussions because then it will implicate the puppet masters.
Exactly. You know, and I just here this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to this story here, and this is from EJI.org. So, racial double standard and drug laws persist today. All right, the racial gap in drug enforcement and sentencing is a byproduct of America's punitive response to the crack crisis of the late 80s and the war on drugs it unleashed. President Nixon initiated the war on drugs in 1971 in order to criminalize black people. Well, I mean, you can see how leaning this is, but I'll take it with a grain of salt. Sensationalized stories of crack babies and violent crackheads routinely portrayed crack users as black, even though most crack users are all still white. The network reports crack users were painted as dangerous degenerates who were scary and threatening and needed to be locked up. Back to Hillary Clinton about the super predator.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that when they were talking about the young kids that were on crack?
Yeah.
Or that were doing a bunch of like gang violence and things like that. They're called super predators. You know, they had to throw their own spin on it.
Yep.
Right. The stigma was so wrong for African Americans, they couldn't get help they needed because everybody looked at them as less than.
Mm.
I firsthand experience from my family side. This is not incorrect.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
You
And
know.
again, that's why they muddy the waters so that way you can't have these real conversations because they are real. I mean, people that abuse these kind of drugs because of, as we talked about this whole show, how it led into, you know, getting injected into their communities. It seeps into the children, and they're grown. They are born, you know, with that addiction in their bodies.
Exactly. Policymakers responded to tough on crime laws, including the Bipartisan Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which featured 100-to-1 power cocaine to crack disparity and dedicated $750 of $1.7 billion in federal funds for law enforcement and incarceration. In 1988, Congress provided hundreds of millions of more for police and prisons and made crack the only drug for which simple possession was a federal crime. Now, remember, just a scintilla. A scintilla. The size of a quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was Mr. Biden was a big champion of that bill, and
Mr. Biden.
yeah, I'm not giving him the respect because they do that a lot. They do Mr. Trump, so it's Mr. Biden. But he was a big champion of that, right? And then, you know, we got the Hunter Biden laptop, which showed a bigger amount that was being weighed by his son. So, you know, it's crazy how people have supported him. with all that they know.
Yeah. And then, of course, we've got drugs in hip hop. And this is the last part.
Yeah.
And you already know, like, like in the hip hop community, in which they talk a lot about positivity, and then going into the 90s, it just ramped it up.
That's right. Yeah, there was a switch. Back in the day, because these were like street poets. That's basically what they were. You know what I mean? They had a lot to talk about. Yeah, they had a lot to talk about. They had as we can see, it was like, yes, you really do have a lot of strife. You have a lot to say. The people around you are going through it and all this other kind of stuff. And the rappers from back then, they wanted to speak to their community and say, listen, don't pick up that crack pipe. Don't do these things. Like it doesn't end well. Like there was, so in this article that you just pulled up, but I'll just read, Grandmaster Melly Mel, he came out with the white lines, don't do it. There and basically in it, a lot, some of the lyrics it's basically just saying like it's gonna hurt you, like don't go down that road, this, and they used a lot of like what do you call it, like code words and stuff like that to not really say it outright, but that was the theme, because these guys were speaking from the heart. They probably grew up around it. They seen a lot of their families and friends go down the spiral. And then all of a sudden there was a switch that happened. And, we've talked about this before, off air, but there is a video that has gone viral over the last few years. It's still under the conspiratory, umbrella, but Crazy Bone, who is from a rapper from Bone Thugs and Harmony, he alleged, now he said that this is a letter that was written to him about everything that went down from somebody else. So he's saying that he wasn't there. So let's just put that out there. But apparently there was a meeting in 1991 where the private prisons that the music industry executives had invested a lot of the money, especially the money that goes to these rappers, in private prisons, and it'll be in their best interest to promote gangster rap and promote heavy use of drugs, violent crimes, hypersexuality, and the like. And then you can actually see it in the 1990s. Then it's like The Chronic comes out by Cypress Hill, and it just keeps going. Now then you fast forward to the 2000s, sipping on some syrup, talking about how you take this drug and your sexual proclivities will be, a lot better, like that she's going to want you to do it, and making it. And then you have it now where these rappers are out here just popping pills and promoting it.
What was that drink? It was Robitussin and
I don't know.
It got you.
It was probably like an upper and a downer, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it was really, really bad.
Yeah, because that was big in the 90s. That's what got River Phoenix, but he was taking like actual drugs. But it was like a speedball or something like that, where it was like an upper and a downer. But yeah, and so you can say, oh, it's just a coincidence that all of this went down and all of these, crime bills were implemented and they went from trying to veer people away from doing toxic things that destroyed them to let's just promote it. Everybody have a party. It's actually good. You're cool. You're missing out if you're not taking these drugs. But it's very, very suspicious. Codeine. Oh, goodness gracious.
Yep. Yeah. You mix that in your alcohol, codeine. Oh my God. It this really F's up your liver. Really bad.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that's why, that's why I do my music reactions, right? I support independent artists heavy because they talk about this stuff. They go back to the roots of music when they were saying how bad and how toxic all of these actions were.
Exactly. Right. So this whole segment, it explored the complex history of Nixon's initial declaration of war on drugs, and then through the opioid epidemic of today, but examining the policies and social dynamics across these for decades, right? Because we highlight how the government response had a different it was different based on the demographics.
Yeah.
And I had to point that out. I always do that in each I'm doing this in each episode because when I talked about last episode, the Tuskegee experiment, what other race dealt with that?
That's right.
When you talk about the crack epidemic versus the opioid epidemic, like the penalties, they just said it was 100-1.
Yep.
It was 100-1. For every one person that got arrested for opioids, 100 black people got arrested 20 years earlier, with like 30 million less people in the country.
Yep.
So
I mean, you got to point it out.
I have to point it out. Like, if I don't, somebody's going to drag me out of my house. Be like, bro, what are you talking about this? No, but
no, but you know what? I'm sorry, because even even some independent medias out there, they try to they kind of fall into that polarization just a little too much sometimes. You have to be real. You have to point it out correctly, or this is never going to fix. We have to have these real conversations.
Yeah, so that's why in the next episode, we're gonna dive into the future implications of these policies, what steps might be taken to address ongoing challenges in drug regulation and in rehabilitation, going from the opioid epidemic into hormone therapy.
Oh boy, yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So
I can't wait for that.
This is you see where I'm drawing this line here.
You've done some great segments. I mean, all of your segments are awesome. I'm a little biased. Yes, I work for you. Yes. But this particular series, you got my heart going like this, man. This is
I knew you were going to love this one.
I love this.
I love it.
Great. This is great.
Yes. But yeah, so that's our segment for you folks. Typically when I do a past, present, and future, which is a lot of people's favorite, the first episode, we'll have like a first segment and then we'll jump into it. But the whole second episode it's like the meat and bones of the segment. I don't add anything else to the show except for the entire outline. So I want to make sure that people understand the complexities in different areas, to get that information out to the public.
Yeah. Yeah, because nothing is ever like, that clean cut dry. There's always things that interweave. There's always a lot of other stuff that goes on. It takes a lot. That's why you have to break it down.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, well, that's it for this episode. Again, you can find me on X at @TheRealRoma_AK. We've got Biddy over here, Elizabitty 213A, and join our Discord.
Yes.
Join our Discord. I am actually looking for producers and show content creators that want to do their own show, and that want to come out and make Roma Nation the place to be.
That's right.
So please, if you want to get a hold of me or one of my producers, join the Roma Nation Discord. That's the only place you can do it.
That's right.
And that'll be the place where we can go ahead and get these things going. Also, we've got our website. I'm gonna pull that
Show
up.
it again.
There it is. Hey, who's that dude right there with that glorious gray beard?
Wow, you got some profile, bro.
I know, right? Yep, we got Scrapjaw there, Brian, Elizabitty. Yep, Treebeard. Treebeard, I'm about to pull you up in 5. 3, 2, 1.
Late.
There he
How's
is.
it going, love ladies? Thanking you being here.
Yep, my show producer. He's back up here.
Yeah, apparently I'm the guy. Apparently he's paying me too much, so he's trying to find a replacement.
Yeah, that's how it works. No, I'm just kidding. No,
It's like the Amazon effect.
By the way, he doesn't pay me anything, so unless you want to pay him to work for us, please like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah, well, we're rapidly expanding right now. So, and then once we get to that point in time, it's gonna be great for everyone. So if you have any great ideas,
if you have an idea for you to produce, if you want to be a producer, if you want to help out and learn just how we do things, just message me at Treebeard. The same thing for X and Discord.
Exactly. Yep. And then, of course, right there at the bottom, you can do a monetary contribution if you guys want to go ahead and jump in, help us out, support the show, get everything.
Keep our editors and whiskey. If you know, you know.
This guy. Anyways,
yeah, that definitely, and it really does help because we are, like we said, the mainstream media. I'm sorry, but it's infiltrated, bro. You want the real news, you want real topics being discussed. You need to support independent media, and we hope you guys are inclined to do so because it really does help us do on the ground work and everything else behind the scenes. It takes a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. So next week will be the final episode, part 3 of 3 of the War on Drugs. We also have Sunset Rants that goes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This Friday is going to be a very special one because Fluffy Hobo has got a very special guest.
What?
Santa Claus?
I don't even
know.
know.
If you guys know who she is, but her name is Libertarian Goth.
Ooh.
And it's going to be, this episode is going to be very spicy.
Wow.
To say
Ooh,
the least.
I love her
So-
aesthetic, and I love the first words there. Government sucks. She's got an A in my book.
Oh yeah, she's already there.
Right.
That
I'm
sold me
already
right
her
off the
BFF.
bat.
Yeah.
You know?
Also, shameless plug in here, but also this Sunday we have the first ever conservative-based game jam live stream. So be sure to check that out. I'll be producing that behind the scenes, unfortunately, but you know, we have 2 special guests. One of them being none other than Ian Crossland from Timcast.
Ian Crossland from Timcast.
Oh, sweet.
That's right. He's going to be there.
That's awesome.
I told you guys, we are growing.
I know. This is awesome. It's really, really great.
So, yeah, as of right now, we need as much help as we can get, and then try to get in front of this this carriage that's running down the street and the horses running that way. But we're doing well, and we aim to get better. So,
Yes.
Without further ado, that's Elizabitty down there, Treebeard, my in-show host. I'm AK, your favorite guy, signing out. We'll see you next week for episode 3. Peace.
On the call, lads and ladies.
Absolutely.